Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at the importance of attacking the castled king. So let's get started with this first puzzle. So when we're looking at any tactic, we want to look at our active pieces. So here we see our knight, our bishop, our queen, and our other bishop. So here when looking at attacking the castled king, we can see that this king is relatively open and it doesn't really have many pawns defending it. So there is a lot of availabilities for us to give checks. So when we're attacking the castled king, the first thing you want to look for is giving a check to the king. So here when I look at our active pieces, I see that the one check that we have is bishop to h6 check. So when we calculate this, the king's only spot to move is on g8. So after we go bishop to h6 check, they go king to g8. Now once again, when I look at our active pieces, I see that we have another check, queen to g5. So once we go queen to g5, black is forced to play bishop to g6, because if they don't, then we will be threatening queen to g7 checkmate. So they have to go bishop to g6, and after they play that move, we have knight takes on g6, which will eventually win us the game. So now in this next puzzle, let's look at our active pieces once again. So we have our queen, our rook, and our bishop. These are the three pieces that will most likely be involved in attacking the castled king. Now let's look at white's position of the king. So here we can see that our rook is kind of hitting the king, and our bishop is covering a square of the king to move in. So here we can see that we have a lot of play on the king. We can also see that our queen is kind of hitting the king as well. So we have a lot of play on the king, and we have to find a way to break through. So once again, let's start by looking at our active pieces and the checks that we have. So looking at our active pieces, I see two checks. One is rook takes on h3 check, and another one is queen takes on g2. So if we do queen takes on g2, this is just lost because they can just take back our queen. So that's not the best option here. Now if we look at rook takes h3 check, this is actually the best move, because after rook takes on h3, they cannot go g takes on h3 because the queen is pinning that pawn. So rook takes on h3 is a good check. Then after king goes to g1, now let's look at our other checks on the board. So when looking at our active pieces, I see two checks, rook to h1 check and bishop to h2 check. So if we go rook to h1 check, the king can take back, but we could go queen to h4, and if the king moves back, then we have checkmate on h2. But unfortunately, white's queen is covering that h4 square, so queen to h4 does not work. So rook to h1 doesn't work either. So now let's look at our other check, bishop to h2. This seems like a pretty good check because after bishop to h2, the king is forced to move to h1, and then we have multiple discover check opportunities. So I think bishop to h2 is the best move. So now when looking at this puzzle, we have to look at our active pieces. We see our knight, we see our bishop, our rook, our other rook, our queen, and our other bishop as well. So basically all our major pieces are involved in attacking the castled king in some way. So now there are a lot of things to consider here. We can see that our queen and our rook are doubled up, and we're kind of putting pressure on this rook, then somewhat like putting pressure on the king as well. We also have this aligned up pieces with our rook and our bishop hitting the queen. We also have this bishop pinning this pawn, and this knight having some play on this pawn. So we can see that we have a lot of play here. So now once again we want to look at the checks that we have with our advanced pieces. So we have our bishop, our knight, our rook, our other rook, our queen, and our bishop. So the only check that I really see here is bishop takes on f2, but this is not good whatsoever because the queen can just take back. If the rook takes back, then we do have queen takes on e1, but that won't happen because they have the option of queen takes on f2. So now let's look at another option that we have, and that is with this discovered attack. So of course, there are a lot of things that we can do here, but we have to keep in mind that our queen is also being attacked at the same time. So if we do try to win a pawn in this case, they can just grab our queen as well. So we have to be careful of that. So this discovered attack does not work either. Now let's look at something else. queen takes on e1. So this is another opportunity we have. So here, if we go queen takes on e1, the rook will be taking back, and then we can take their rook. So now we're trading 2 rooks for a queen, and that is usually in our benefit, in the benefit of the person who wins the 2 rooks. So right now, I think that this is a really good move because we're also getting some play on the king, and it opens up opportunities for more discovered attacks on the queen. So in my opinion, queen takes on e1 is the best move. Now let's move on to our final puzzle. Here, once again, let's look at our active pieces. We have our queen, we have our knight, we have this bishop, and we have this other bishop. And these are the pieces that are probably going to be involved in this attacking of the castle king. So now when we look at white's king, we want to look at the weaknesses it has around its structure. So here we can see that this square is pretty weak because of the pawn moving to g3. So what can we do with this situation? So I think that we should put some pressure on this square. So first we have to look at all the checks, and we do have a couple of checks here. We do have knight to h3 as one of the checks, and we also have knight to e2 as one of the checks. So we really have to take advantage of this opened file that we have with this bishop. So after looking at all the checks, I think knight to h3 is the best check, because if we go knight to e2, then all the pieces can just grab the knight, the rook, the queen, and the knight, and the bishop. So knight to e2 doesn't really work. And when we look at our second check, knight to h3, the king is forced to move. And here we can see that our queen and our knight will be attacking this f2 pawn. So the king cannot go to h1 because of the weakness that they created on the g2 square and opening up our bishop. So our bishop is looking at this diagonal. So the king has to go to f1, and then we have queen takes on f2 checkmate. So knight to h3, king goes to f1, then we have queen takes on f2 checkmate.